to the Residence Messenger program on Taipei Broadcasting Station. I'm your host, Ross Darrell Final. Today, I am joined by Dr. Kamil Tokarski. Dr. Tokarski, welcome to the show.
Hello.
And Olympia Kotaje of the Polish office. Olympia is a cultural and public diplomacy expert in the Polish office, and she is accompanying Dr. Tokarski today. We just heard some Chopin. That's an example of his romanticism.
Yes,
is that correct?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the piece we just heard.
So we just heard a Fantasy Impromptu, Opus 66, a very well-known piece by Frédéric Chopin. Quite an interesting composition because it was actually never published during Chopin's life. That was one of the pieces found by Chopin's friend Juliusz Fontana, who published several works after Chopin passed away.
Now, I'm so glad you said it's a well-known piece, because one of the things I want you to help our audience understand is, how did you become a musician when you were a young man in Poland? What kind of exposure? Was it something that was in your school and a big focus, or something you developed on your own, or a family or a friend? How did you get into music, and this kind of music? Because I have to be frank with you, when I was that age, I was listening to rock music and things like that.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Well, for me, it was a very natural process, because my father was an orchestra conductor and a pianist. He loved music. He graduated from Warsaw Music Academy. At that time it was Warsaw Music Academy, and he played piano every day. And the pieces I play today, those were the pieces that I listened to growing up. I listened to him playing it every day, and for me, it was so normal that I found it strange when I would go and visit my friends' houses and there would be no piano. I would be actually surprised. Where is the piano? We don't have a piano. How come you don't have a piano, right? Because for me, it was just like a family member. So it was difficult not to become a musician, because I was under such sort of you could say great impression. It's the most beautiful form of art, and something that people should admire, because I would see my parents and my sisters appreciate it so much. It was later that I found out that it's not exactly the case in the rest of society. That was a wake-up call, but it was too late. I was already pursuing music education, and very confident that I would like to be a musician in the future.
And since your father was also, if I may say, an expert, was there a point in your musical education where your ability as a youngster sort of started to speed ahead, and your father said, "Well, you're just a genius. You need to go for more teaching than I could provide here in the home, and you're just racing ahead of me." Or was he the opposite kind of father, where he said, "You're just not working hard enough on this"?
And my father was actually a very good teacher, and I know that even if I did something spectacular, he would never ever call me a genius, because I don't think it's good for young children to hear that they are geniuses. So at home there was always a sense that we are pursuing something that's sort of perfect, and the perfection is something we'll never reach, right? So we can get close to it. We can reach a very high level. We can influence people. We can feel that our skills are really great. But in reality, there's just no way to be a perfect musician. There's no way to have a perfect interpretation of Fantasy Impromptu. And what we have to strive for is to just communicate to the best of our ability. And if we communicate to the best of our ability, that's where we know that we're doing it right.
And to do it right, was there a favorite instrument that you had developed a love for when you started to further your education as the years went by? We mentioned piano.
Yes.
You said you always had piano in the home, but were there other instruments that you started to develop an affection for?
That's a very good question. Of course, I loved piano the most. That was the most this is the most powerful instrument where a single person, maybe only organ, can compete with piano. But piano has this sort of a power that especially young teenagers want. My sister is a violinist, and I love violin. I absolutely love violin. But when I was a teenager, I was glad I'm not a violinist because I can get much more sound out of the piano than out of the violin. But of course, I had inspirations, and I had sort of periods when I would really like harpsichord. Harpsichord was a predecessor of a piano, and it was an instrument used in the Baroque period by composers such as Scarlatti, Bach, Handel, and over the years I developed a really strong affection towards the harpsichord, which I was able to fulfill during my doctorate degree years, where I would take harpsichord courses, and I actually was able to perform on a big stage on a harpsichord. It was fantastic experience. And actually, in my studio in Taiwan, I have a very good piano, great piano. But my dream is to get a harpsichord.
And where do the best harpsichords come from? Where are they made?
You know,
you're supposed to say Poland.
Well, actually, harpsichord. It's an interesting question, because harpsichord is actually not that hard to make in comparison to piano. Modern piano is very difficult to make, and that's why modern pianos are very expensive. Now, with harpsichords, the amount of variables that goes into sound production is far less than with piano. You know, with piano, when you press a key, there's literally hundreds of dynamic levels. How hard, how soft you press the key, and then the hammer strikes the string. And the better piano, the more dynamic levels there are. So let's say a great piano made by Steinway or Fazioli or Besendorfer will have really wide range of dynamic levels, and then a good pianist can take advantage of that. It's almost like a painter who has more colors to choose from. If I have more colors to choose from, it gives me options, right? It gives me possibilities to express myself maybe fuller. Now with harpsichord, there is only one dynamic level, so the whole mechanism works differently. In piano, the hammer strikes the string. In harpsichord, there's a little tip of a quill that plucks the string. It always plucks the string exactly the same. And because it plucks the string exactly the same, and there's less variables in that path from pressing the key to the actual sound production, the mechanism is just simpler. Where are the best harpsichords made? I actually don't know. I actually don't know. Probably the best ones are the old ones made in the 16th, 17th century. Those probably were fantastic instruments. I have to get on that. I have to start looking for a good harpsichord if I want to get it to my studio, because I would like to introduce it to young students, because young students have no idea that such instrument even exists. It's not, piano is quite easy to understand because it's in the pop music and rock music. People see it, people have it at home, but nobody has harpsichord at home, right? This is something that sort of vanished. As soon as the modern piano was developed, people were not interested in harpsichord anymore. So in the 19th century, composers did not use harpsichord anymore. In the 18th century, they did, but as soon as the Cristofori, the Italian inventor, created the modern piano, the harpsichord's era was over. And now only in 20th century, some composers started going back to harpsichord for its unique sonorities. Other than harpsichord, my favorite instrument was actually, it's all of the instruments, because it's an orchestra. I absolutely loved an orchestra. I felt like if there's an instrument that can compete with grand piano, it would be this whole symphony orchestra, just because it adds this endless possibilities of colors, different instruments, different dynamic levels. It's incredible combinations that you as a composer can take advantage of. And that dream and that fascination was also fulfilled during my doctorate degree years, because my minor was actually orchestra conducting. So I did conduct an orchestra, and had that experience. And that was actually, my father's profession. So it was very nice to explore that finally.
Tell us a bit about getting both a master's and a PhD. We sometimes meet musicians. We may watch a symphony orchestra performance or an opera performance. But those of us who are not actually in that field may not think of the musicians as people who would pursue advanced studies or academic studies as opposed to just perfecting their skills and getting up to like a professional level. Tell us a bit about why you got a master's and a PhD and what were actually your thesis and things like that.
Yes. Well, the reason why I got a master's and PhD was not exactly because I wanted to have a master's or PhD. My reasons were more simple. I wanted to spend more time just focusing on music, and I knew that if I just go into the world, it's possible, but it would be very, very difficult.
So if you just went into the world more quicker, you're trying to make a living as
yes.
a musician in an orchestra or something
exactly,
like
that. Exactly. So I thought to myself, I want to pursue more school, but not for the sake of writing thesis or dissertation and getting those fancy titles, but for the sake of giving myself more time to actually go really in depth into the craft. Because music requires a lot of time, and it requires a lot of time, not necessarily in a classroom, not necessarily writing research papers, but a lot of time of you just being with an instrument and having a long sessions, practice sessions, lots of thinking, lots of analysis, lots of self-listening, developing an ear to listen to yourself. It's actually very, very difficult to listen to yourself. That ability is very, very hard to develop. And when I was at school, that was sort of my priority. So I almost felt that I'm doing 2 degrees. I'm doing the actual degree, which is all the requirements that I'm supposed to do, and then after I'm done with everything that's I'm supposed to do, I'm using those facilities. I'm using all those great pianos. I'm using all those concert halls to further my own. We could call it research, my own development, and that I think is something that young students would benefit from if they did that more, because oftentimes young students think that they will enter school and they will do everything that the requirements ask them to do, and that means I am a fully qualified great musician. Well, it's not exactly the case. I always believe that if I want to really be good at something, I have to go. The requirements that I have to do is just the minimum. I have to go and build on top of that, and that's what I did. And so I used my time at school, I would say quite wisely. I was working quite hard. I was practicing every day. I was doing lots of recordings, and it's all on top of what's expected. And you asked a very interesting question, because you said that normally people, when they see a musician, they don't think of a musician as somebody with a doctorate degree, right? Somebody who pursued an academic studies. And that's a very good point, because that's not how it used to be. It used to be, in the 19th century, musicians had a very little formal education, conservatory education, and at that time, their training, the essence of their training was in the field. It was when they were composing, or it was when they were teaching. The problem today is that everything's institutionalized, so it's very difficult to have that very direct connection with music. You end up working at school, the school gives you X amount of hours, and then there's very little time for you to do something outside of it, or you end up working at the orchestra, or I think the saddest, the most unfortunate positions are composers, because today when you graduate, when you write something, how can you make people want to listen to what you created. There's so much music around us. There's so much noise, so much bad music, and it's very difficult to get people to actually notice you, to see what you've created, that you created something new. So it's not an easy time to be a composer. It's an easier time to be a music teacher or a performer, but for composers it's really quite hard because they compete with the noise of the entire world, which there's so much right now. In the 19th century, if you wanted to hear music, it had to be done live. It had to be done next to you. Now today, you have your phone and you basically have access to the entire music library that there is. All the music genres, it's right there. And because of that, people lost the ability to really focus on something new, to really appreciate something new. Yeah, so it's not an easy time to be a composer and add something valuable, something new to the field.
Speaking of getting noticed, Olympia, your work as someone who helps people in Taiwan understand Polish culture. What do people in Taiwan know or don't know about the music of Poland or brilliant composers and musicians like Dr. Tokarski?
Like Dr. Tokarski. Well, first of all, we are very happy to have Dr. Tokarski here. And we are, yes, and we are sure that in the next coming years, Taiwanese audience will have a lot of opportunities to know more about Polish music and
Yes.
composers in Taiwan. And as far as I know, you are the first Polish pianist based in Taiwan. Although there are famous Polish pianists that from time to time come to Taiwan for the concerts, like Andrzejewski,
Rafał Blechacz recently visited,
recently.
Christian Zimmerman, yes.
Yes, Christian Zimmerman. So,
yes.
So they are well known to Taiwanese audience. Yes.
Great. Well, we're going to talk more about musical education and performing in Taiwan with our musical guest, Dr. Tokarski. But first, we're going to go into some important messages. Welcome back to the Residence Messenger program on Taipei Broadcasting Station. Our guests today are Dr. Kamil Tokarski and Olympia Kotozhe. Dr. Tokarski is a music teacher and conductor and performer here in Taiwan, and Olympia is a cultural affairs expert at the Polish office. Dr. Tokarski, the piece we were just listening to, the Polonaise A-flat major, tell us a little bit about that one.
Well, that is probably the most famous piece composed by President Chopin. Almost everybody should be familiar with the main theme of that piece. It's quite interesting because Polonaise is a Polish national aristocratic old dance. I would say it's a symbol of old Poland, of old great powerful Poland, because Poland used to be a very, very big, very powerful country with very rich culture. And when Chopin was young, of course Poland didn't exist because Poland was already partitioned. So Chopin actually lived in Warsaw Kingdom that was governed by the Russian Tsar. But there was some freedom. There was some freedom to actually experience, the old remains of Great Poland. And actually, during our concert next week, we'll talk a little bit about that. Chopin was fascinated by Polish history of great Polish kings, great Polish battles such as Grunwald battle, and there are actually sources that say that he liked to read about those and play piano, improvise, trying to recreate these events musically. And one of the first composition that Chopin published was a Polonaise. He dedicated it to his piano teacher Wojciech Żywny, and he composed Polonaises throughout his entire life. Now the Polonaise we just heard is a Polonaise Heroic Opus 53. That's a very late opus, one of the last Polonaises that Chopin composed. And actually, when you look at all of the Polonaises, you can kind of see the development that Chopin went through as a musician and also as a person. He started off with very youthful, simple, elegant Polonaises when he was a teenager. Then went into explore the genre a little bit more, adding more complexity. And then with Opus 53, the Polonaise really grew into something that nobody after Chopin was able to ever match. So there are composers that composed Polonaises, but it never matched the level of impact that Chopin could reach. Now, after the Opus 53, Chopin wrote one more Polonaise, which is called the Polonaise Fantasy. That was the last Polonaise he's composed, and that one is sort of you could say where he concludes the genre of Polonaise, because he mixes this Polonaise rhythm, this aristocratic rhythm, with very romanticized and very free expression. There's a little bit of nocturne, there's a little bit of almost impressionistic sections. So that can show you that he went from very strict, almost classical model to experimental, free, and really mature level with his last Polonaise. And the Opus 53 is sort of the most representative. Like, that's the Polonaise that everybody knows. That's the one that everybody wants to hear. And probably the piece of Chopin that reached the farthest, in terms of impact around the world. So the Polonaise, for me, as a Polish person, they have very significant meaning. For years, the Polish radio used the Polonaise Opus 40, the military Polonaise, as their sort of the signal that they use whenever they broadcast a program. Polonaise is used. We are actually dancing Polonaise after we pass our high school exams, the final high school exams. Before graduating high school, 100 days before graduating high school, we have a ball where all the students and teachers get together, and the tradition is that we would dance a Polonaise. And oftentimes we would dance actually a Chopin Polonaise. So it is embedded in our culture very, very deeply. And me as a Polish pianist, who's really who's living really far away from home, right? Taiwan is really far away from Poland. I almost feel a sense of duty that I would like to bring this to Taiwanese audience, and then share a little bit of home with them by playing this music, because I think that's how Chopin felt when he composed it. That when he spent most of his life in Paris, also far away from home. And that was probably his outlet where he could feel a little bit of home.
You mentioned Chopin's path from a young composer to matured, and how over the years he wrote the different Polonaise. You're an educator here in Taiwan. You educate younger musicians. Tell us a little bit about that, your experience teaching music to young Taiwanese people. Because a lot of us we know that for many parents in Taiwan, this is important, just like a lot of other after-school activities.
Yes.
More math, more science
Yes.
at the Bushiban, at the cram school,
Yes.
and also musical lessons. And we see sometimes we see some Taiwanese kids on the MRT or the bus, and they're carrying around a very large instrument with
Yes.
them. I ask myself, do they really love it, or are their parents forcing them into this? So tell us a little bit about musical education and the future of youth and what they might grow into as musicians.
Yes. Well, first of all, I think it's very good that in Taiwan parents find studying music valuable, because it is very, very valuable. There's actually a lot of academic research that supports it. There are many scientists that wanted to scientifically prove if there is an evidence that studying music does impact young children, and they found it, and it does. And when it comes to my approach and so my philosophy and how I see young students in Taiwan, my goal is so that both students and parents never treat music the same way that they would treat sports. And that's often what I see happens. Oftentimes, students or parents, they look at music as a tool to sort of unlock achievements, to pass to the next level. And
something that looks good on a university
Yes.
application.
Yes, that's true. So they treat it sort of as a tool to get something, right? To get something actually material, to win a competition, to pass an audition, to get to the next level, to get a diploma, and I think that's really harmful both to music and also to kids, because they start to see it as something you compete with. What doesn't help is the amount of competitions, music competitions everywhere, and it's almost expected that if you study music, you have to compete. I think it's unfortunate. I think that, of course, competitions are beneficial, and of course, for mature artists, they're kind of necessary if they want to really get recognized. But putting children against children at a very young age to compete while doing a really, really beautiful craft, I think it, in many cases, can almost destroy the passion for music, because music should focus on, first of all, developing skills to express yourself. So when I'm playing a Polonaise, I'm of course expressing what Chopin tried to say, but I'm adding something of my own, right? Because that's why every interpretation of that piece will be different. There will never be two exactly the same approaches to these pieces. And when you do this with the intention of being better than someone else, you will start doing things that are sort of against what you would naturally do. Right? That's why today pianists tend to play extremely fast, because they want to play faster than other pianists, or they want to play louder than other pianists. And in all of that, music is often forgotten. It sort of goes to the farther, in the list of importance. It's not as important. The most important thing is to show off, to exhibit, use that piece to exhibit your own skills. And that's where music becomes sport. And that's very, very unfortunate, because I think that the main point is missing when that's done.
And this kind of music, classical music, Chopin and other composers from Europe, they are quite popular in this part of the world. We do see a heavy focus on teaching children about this kind of music, giving them the opportunity to learn how to play this music, play the instruments, not just here in Taiwan, but also Japan, Korea.
Yeah.
China are also known for this. Well, why is that? Why is this music from the other side of the world taken such great popularity in this part?
That's a very good question. That's a very, very good question. And it's something that I sometimes ask myself, because I sometimes feel like in Poland, we lost some of that appreciation. Almost, we tend to sometimes think that's. I mean, not everybody, but in general, it's almost seems like an archaic, old craft. And why is it that in Asia, especially in Japan, I think, people are so in love with Chopin's music? I heard several theories. Some people say that it reminds them of the sentimental nostalgia that's present in sort of old Japanese songs, and maybe old Taiwanese songs as well. Like this same type of, not the same, but similar type of nostalgia that's present in that music. Or maybe for parents, they feel like this is something international, something from different cultures. Just like in Poland, we would train, martial arts, Asian martial arts, and that's exotic for us. Maybe that's the same for Taiwanese parents. We'll have to ask them. I'm not sure.
Well, you do meet a number of parents in your studio with the students. What instruments or styles or what's the most popular thing that parents come to you and say, I want my child to learn this?
Well, there's not a single thing, and actually I must say that I'm really lucky because I work with parents that really sort of understand my philosophy. So they don't really have expectation. As soon as they have expectation, that's a red flag, because I feel like most people don't know that much about this craft to actually have expectations. When you bring a child to a piano teacher, you kind of have to trust the piano teacher to do the right thing. And when the parents will say, oh, I would like him to play this, I would like him to do that, most cases this is not the best route that the child should take. So my philosophy is, if I have a student, I want to work with the student for a long time, very consistently, to get to know what he or she is capable of, and to really build solid foundation. Because before we can communicate artistic ideas, we have to have craft. We have to have really solid technical foundation. After we do, then we can become artists. So it's sort of like, first you have to know how to walk, then you can learn how to fly, right?
Well, let's listen to one more piece from Chopin, Hexameron Variation. Olympia, we've heard several pieces today played by Dr. Tokarski, and he has a concert coming up. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, of course. The concert is taking place on May 8th, and it's going to be in the S-Light Concert Hall, and the title is Discovering Chopin. Could you say something more about this piece?
About the piece or about the concert?
About the concert.
About the concert, please.
Okay. Yes. So yes, the concert will take place on May 8th. It will be an interesting concert, unusual concert, because it will be accompanied by spoken commentary in Chinese. Spoken commentary by Anna Majszak, our Polish friend who speaks perfect Chinese. She's been living in Taiwan for a long time, and the idea was to give an unusual sort of birthday recital, because this year we're celebrating 220th birthday of Frédéric Chopin, to give a recital where we could talk a little bit more about these pieces, where we could introduce the audience to some of the lesser known facts about this music, because oftentimes people come to the concerts and they don't even look at the program. Sometimes they sort of come and they listen to the music, that's it. And there is much more to it, just like we discussed about the Polonaise. There's usually story behind, there's meaning behind these titles, and we would like to talk a little bit about that. So Anya, before every piece, she'll take a few minutes to discuss what we'll hear. So that's an unusual aspect of that event.
And I trust that there'll be temperature taking and
yes,
hand sanitizer. Will
yes.
you have to wear a mask while you're playing?
I don't think so. But I know that the Essence Hall is taking all the necessary precautions to make everybody feel feel safe.
So we welcome people to attend. It's on May
8th,
May 8th.
Wesley Hall at 7:30 p.m.
And where can people find more information about the performance? Is there a website?
Yes, there is a website. www. Maybe we can put it in the description of the video, because I don't remember exactly.
People can also go to our Facebook page and find
All right.
the
Okay,
announcement.
what's the Facebook page?
Polish office in Taipei.
Polish office in
Poland
Taipei.
台北办事处.
Okay, terrific. And more information about Dr. Tokarski is on your website, so why don't you share that with us?
Yes, my website, actually I have two websites. One is kamiltokarski.com, and the other one is taipeipiano.com.
Terrific. Well, we've been joined today by Dr. Kamil Tokarski, musician, pianist, educator extraordinaire here in Taipei, and Olympia Koteje from the Polish office, cultural expert. Thank you so much for sharing information about your upcoming concert, and we hope that our audience will all enthusiastically attend. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.